Grace. It was a late summer evening, and I was driving home from a friend's house. My gas gauge was dangerously close to empty, so I pulled into a gas station I'd never been to before on the outskirts of town. The parking lot was dimly lit and totally quiet, besides the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. As I got out of my car and reached for the gas pump, I noticed him. A man, tall and lanky, stood beneath the flickering light, just beyond the edge of the station's parking lot. He wore a long, dark coat that seemed out of place on such a warm night. I tried to shake off the unease that settled in my gut and focused on filling the car. As I inserted my credit card into the pump, I could feel his eyes on me. It was an unsettling sensation, as if he was sizing me up. I kept my head down, trying to avoid eye contact, but I could sense him approaching. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and echoed ominously in the quiet night. I finished fueling up and turned back to my car, and there he was, now standing just a few feet away. His face was obscured by the shadows of his hood, but I could feel his gaze drilling into me. My heart raced, and I fumbled for my keys, my fingers trembling. Right as I managed to unlock the door, I heard him say, "I like your hair." I quickly climbed inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the gas station, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me, his silhouette shrinking in my rearview mirror. I drove a few miles down the road, and the tension in my chest began to ease. Maybe I was just overreacting, I told myself. But then, suddenly, I noticed a pair of headlights appear in my rearview mirror, and they were closing in fast. My heart sank as I realized it was him, the man from the gas station, following me. Panic set in as I sped up, desperately trying to get further away. I took a series of sharp turns, hoping to lose him, but he stayed right on my tail. I remember thinking it felt like a scene from a horror movie. The feeling of being pursued by a stranger in the dead of night. Couldn't believe it was happening to me in real life. My mind raced, and I knew I had to get to a populated area, somewhere safe. The bright sign of a 24-hour convenience store appeared on the right side of the road, and I made the snap decision to quickly pull in. The bright fluorescent lights bathed the parking lot in an eerie glow as I screeched to a stop. I bolted from my car, my heart pounding in my chest, and rushed inside. The store clerk looked up in surprise as I burst through the door, gasping for breath. I quickly explained the situation just as the car that was following me pulled into the parking lot. Thankfully, the clerk believed me and called the police right away. Just as the car began to back out of the parking lot, the officers arrived, blocking him in. The car had no plates, so after a quick search of the man and his car, the police handcuffed him. As I watched them put him into the police cruiser, relief washed over me. I couldn't believe something so crazy could happen to me, and so close to where I lived. Later, I found out that the police searching the car had found duct tape, a bloody knife, and a bag full of human hair. Alex. I was in the final stretch of a cross-country drive to visit my sister in California. It was after 2 a.m. I was exhausted from driving all day, but had only 1 hour to go. Finding it difficult to keep my eyes open, with every mile seeming like an eternity, I pulled into a gas station to stretch and grab a drink. I parked in the empty lot, got out of the car, stretched for a minute, then walked to the door, shaking out my body as I moved to try and wake myself up. I entered the store, headed for the nearby coolers, and grabbed an energy drink, hoping it would help to inject some life back into me. The fluorescent lights, for some reason, created an especially sterile feel in the store. As I approached the counter, the clerk, a smaller man with tired eyes, said, "Late night, huh?" "You have no idea," I replied, the fatigue very evident in my voice. "Almost to my sister's place, but I've been in that car all day." He gave a knowing nod, ringing up the drink. Well, this ought to give you a little kick. Anything else for you? Just this, thanks. I handed over the cash. After paying, I stepped back outside. The air felt much colder than it had been a minute ago, before I'd walked into the store. I got back to my car and set the energy drink on the roof, and fished for my keys to unlock the door. And then, out of nowhere, I heard a woman's voice, desperate and urgent, screaming, "Help! Help me!" My heart skipped a beat, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. I felt adrenaline course through my veins, instantly overriding my exhaustion. Instinct kicked in, and I followed the cries. They echoed through the night air, bouncing around the deserted lot. It was disorienting at first, the source impossible to pin down. The cries continued. I hurried to the far side of the lot, finally recognizing the screaming was coming from behind the store. I reached the back and immediately saw a massive weathered dumpster. The cries seemed to be coming from the inside, growing louder and more desperate as I came closer. Without much hesitation, I ran to the edge of the dumpster and peered in, short on breath, and I looked down to see the body of a woman, her figure contorted, laying among the bags of trash. Gouges and cuts covered her lifeless body, and her head hung back, nearly decapitated, mouth and eyes gaping open. The shock hit me like a freight train, and before I could react, my stomach revolted. I doubled over, retching, the brutality of it all so overwhelming. Panic surged, and I wiped my mouth, my hands trembling. I staggered around at the front of the store and almost fell inside through the front doors, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion. "There's a body in the dumpster," I mumbled out loud. The clerk came over to help stand me up, and together we walked back to the dumpster, my footsteps stumbling, my heart still pounding in my ears. But when we arrived, it was like stepping into a different dimension. The dumpster contained nothing but black bags of trash. No trace of the body, blood, any of the nightmare I had just witnessed. I just stood there, dumbfounded, frozen with shock. The clerk eyed me suspiciously, as if I'd played some cruel trick. His words were firm, directing me to move along and get some rest. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," he said, a mix of irritation and skepticism in his voice, "but it's messed up." "I'm not lying," I shouted, desperate and overwhelmed. "I just saw a body right here. She was right here." I tried to explain, to convey the horror that I'd witnessed, but it came out in stammered fragments. The clerk's gaze never wavered, his expression unyielding. "Look, there's nothing here, man. You better leave now, before I call the cops." In disbelief, I slowly walked back to my car, looking around the parking lot for signs of anyone else. The lot was barren, and everything was quiet. I pulled away from the gas station, trembling, and arrived at my sister's place, looking like I'd just seen a ghost. She spent a long time convincing me that I was just overtired, hearing and seeing things. But the image of that woman's body is still seared into my mind, and I can't shake it, no matter how hard I try. Emily. It was late, and I was on a road trip, pushing through the final stretch to reach the hotel I'd be staying at for the night. I pulled into a dimly lit gas station, the neon sign buzzing softly in the night. Exhausted, I headed straight for the restroom, grateful for a chance to stretch my legs. The bathroom was empty and lit by a single flickering fluorescent light. I walked to the nearest stall and pushed the door open and stepped inside. As I locked the door behind me, I heard a strange click. I tried to unlock the door, but the latch wouldn't budge. A sinking feeling washed over me. Panic set in as I tried desperately to get the door open. My fingers fumbled and sweat gathered on my forehead. I looked around inside the stall, growing more uneasy as the walls extended down to the floor and reached high above my head. No way to crawl under or climb over. I called out, hoping someone would hear me, but the silence in the small room was suffocating. Minutes felt like hours as I struggled with the stubborn lock. Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard footsteps approaching from outside the bathroom. Relief washed over me, and I called out again, this time louder. "Hey, I'm stuck in here!" The bathroom door opened, and the footsteps stopped abruptly. A long wait. A chill ran down my spine. There was something about the stillness that made my stomach churn. I listened intently, but all I could hear was my own rapid breathing. Then a voice, low and gravelly, spoke from just beyond the stall. "Well, looks like we've got ourselves a situation, don't we?" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was this person? Why did they sound so sinister? The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The stranger chuckled. "Oh, just someone passing through. Don't you worry your pretty little head about me." I could hear them pacing just outside the stall, their presence growing more ominous by the second. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was nowhere to go, except through the door. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of a blade being unsheathed. My breath caught in my throat, and terror surged through me. I knew I had to do something, anything to escape this nightmare. Summoning every ounce of courage, I lunged at the stall door, throwing my weight against it. Surprisingly, the lock gave way, and the door forcefully swung open. Without a second thought, I sprinted out of the restroom and through the gas station, not looking back. I could hear the stranger's laughter echoing behind me, growing fainter as I put distance between us. I didn't stop running until I was back at my car and was able to scramble inside quickly, heart pounding, hands trembling. I peeled out of that gas station, leaving it behind in a cloud of dust. To this day, I can't shake the memory of that night, of being trapped in that bathroom stall with that stranger just outside the door. I still remember the way he laughed as I ran. Susan. I was just a wide-eyed 8-year-old back then, innocent and oblivious to danger. It was a warm summer evening, and my parents had pulled into a gas station on a long stretch of highway. The neon lights buzzed, and some faint country western music could be heard playing from the store radio. As I stepped out of the car, the scent of gasoline hung heavy in the air. I skipped toward the convenience store, eager to grab a candy bar, while my parents tended to the pump. As I entered the store and looked for the candy aisle, a tall, thin man caught my eye. He stood by a magazine rack, his eyes fixed on me. I watched a wide grin spread across his lips. His presence sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt instinctively that something wasn't right. I looked down to the floor and quickly walked further inside. I made my way to the candy section, my heart beginning to pound. I could feel his gaze following me, like a predator sizing up its prey. Panic bubbled up within me, but I tried to act calm to not draw attention to myself. I hastily chose a chocolate bar and rushed to the register. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled as she rang up my purchase. I couldn't contain my anxiety, so I mustered the courage to speak up. "Ma'am, there's a scary man in the store. Do you see him?" She paused, her smile fading, and glanced around the store. "Honey, you and I are the only two people in here," she said, her tone gentle but firm. My heart sank. I looked around, my eyes darting between the aisles. How could he have disappeared so quickly? Fear welled up inside me. With my candy bar in hand, I thanked the clerk and hurried towards the exit. I dared not look more around the store, for fear I would see him again. I was determined to get back to the car as quickly as I could. As I pushed open the door to exit, I felt a sudden, vice-like grip on my arm. My heart raced, and I turned to see him, the man from inside, his sinister grin sending shivers down my spine. "You're coming with me," he barked with a chilling intensity. Just as I began to panic, a voice, strong and determined, cut through the night. "Let her go!" It was my father. He had seen the man's approach and had begun running to intervene. The man's grip faltered, and I seized the opportunity to break free. I sprinted towards my father, tears streaming down my face. He embraced me, stood tall, protective, and his eyes locked with the man's. The would-be kidnapper seemed to realize he was outmatched and turned to flee, disappearing out of sight behind the gas station. My parents reported the incident to the gas station attendant before we drove away, and the police were called. Apparently, they searched for the man, but he was never found. The memory of that night is still vivid to me decades later, and still scares me to think of how real darkness can exist in even the most ordinary of places. Andrew. It was 9:30 p.m., cold, and I was on my way home from a long day at work. I pulled into a quiet gas station to quickly fill up. I was exhausted and looking forward to getting home, eating something hot, and going to bed early. As I stood at the pump, the only real sound I could hear was the chirping of crickets. Then a weak voice caught my attention. I turned to see an elderly woman, her frail form shrouded in a tattered coat, slowly making her way towards me. Her eyes were sunken, almost hollow, and she moved with a slow, deliberate shuffle.
"Excuse me, young man,"
she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper.
"could you spare some change for gas? I am stranded here, and I don't have a penny to my name."
I looked at her and felt sympathy for her immediately. The thought of someone at her age in such a vulnerable position tugged at my heartstrings. I reached for my wallet and pulled out a few dollars to help her out. But as I handed her the money, something in her eyes changed. They flickered with an unsettling intensity, and a crooked smile spread across her face. It was a smile that sent a shiver down my spine, a smile that seemed out of place on a face weathered by time.
"Thank you, kind sir,"
she whispered, her voice taking on an almost sing-song quality.
"You're a true lifesaver."
As she turned to walk away, a chill settled in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I watched as she made her way to an old, beat-up car parked in the shadows. Just as I was about to turn back to my own car, there was a deafening squeal. I whipped around to see the woman's car careening towards mine. The impact of the crash jolted me backwards, away from the collision. I fell to the ground, my heart pounding in my chest, adrenaline surging through me. I quickly got to my feet, scanned the damage of the crash, and then looked through the windshield of the woman's car to see if she was injured. But her seat was empty. She was gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Her badly damaged car sat empty, smoking in the darkness. And then I heard it. That sound I still cannot forget. A chilling, eerie laugh echoed through the night, seeming to come from all directions. I turned to see the woman standing behind me, a few yards away, her face twisted in a sinister grin. With a speed and agility that defied her age, she dashed away and disappeared into the darkness. A fear like I've never felt before or since washed over me. I had the sudden urge to get somewhere safe, get inside the gas station. I sprinted towards the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. After making it inside, I explained the situation to the store clerk, who called the police and helped me to calm some. As I watched the police assess the scene and search for any sign of the mysterious woman, I felt relieved to be unharmed, but also filled with chilling dread by her disappearance. She was never found, and I have not gone to that gas station since.